morning. It is indeed the 25th day of January 2023. Good morning. This is the great KBC. This is News Check. And hoping you are having a wonderful and fruitful morning. Well, this morning the country is waking up to the news that the fourth education CS under the Jubilee regime, or under the fourth regime, passed on yesterday just a few meters to the Nairobi hospital, where he had been rushed to seek treatment after collapsing a total of about 4 times. We are talking about the good Professor George Magoha, who took over the reins of education in the year 2019 as the education CS. But before then, he is not only a technocrat, he is a trained surgeon, and he did a lot in terms of the medical profession here in the country and also in the education, where he was recognized and even made a CS. We do not forget that he was once the chairman of the Kenya National Examination Council, where he did a lot in terms of education and examination reforms. We are eulogizing him as we begin this program, and we will be touching on other matters that touch on the nation a little bit later. We will be looking at his journey, and especially as a true patriot of the country. And it's actually, he died a few days or a few weeks before he took over as a professor of surgery at the University of Maseno. We will begin with that conversation. We would like and we welcome your suggestion, your comments, where you're watching us from, or even how you eulogize or remember the theory as education CS. Allow me to begin with my panelists this morning. Beginning from my immediate left, we have Dr. Isaac Hassan. Dr. Isaac Hassan is a governance and leadership expert, and thank you indeed so much for making time. Just next to him, we have another doctor. We have Dr. Benjamin Musau, who is an advocate of the High Court. Karibu sana, Daktari.
Thank you.
Just next to him, we have Mr. Mark Oseno, who is a Senior Executive Director of Communication and Administration at the Kenya National Union of Teachers. Mark, karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Coming from the Kenya National Union of Teachers, yes. I do remember yesterday I had a rare opportunity of actually going to Nairobi Hospital and later on to the Lee funeral, where his remains have been preserved. And a lot of people did come yesterday, both from medical, government, and also from the education sector. I would like to hear some of your sentiments. But before then, let's take a chronology of how events unfolded yesterday until the demise of the professor.
In one of Kenya's illustrious educational careers, Professor George Alberto More Magoha served as chairman, dean and principal in the College of Health Sciences, and later deputy vice-chancellor at the University of Nairobi. In 2005, Magoha was appointed the vice-chancellor. He would transform the day-to-day running of the institution, drawing accolades and criticism alike. In 2016, he was appointed the chairman of the Kenya National Examination Council by the then President Uhuru Kenyatta. Magoha was then tasked with the mandate of transforming NEC and building public confidence in the institution. He is credited for arresting widespread academic dishonesty and corruption in the administration of national examinations.
Was also found with a cell phone with prepared answer sheets. And he is also in custody as we speak.
On 1st March 2019, Magoha was nominated as the Cabinet Secretary for Education by President Uhuru Kenyatta. He was sworn in on 26th of March 2019, replacing Ambassador Amina Mohammed, who was transferred to the sports docket. Magoha would spend his final months at the Education Ministry spearheading the competency-based curriculum and ensuring secondary schools are prepared to host junior secondary students. The revered educationist, doctor and technocrat breathed his last on Tuesday, aged 71.
Indeed, we are going to remember him both he had been admired, just as Ed Kabasa has said in that report. He was admired and also condemned in equal measure because he was fiery. When he was a don at the University of Nairobi, of course, we will be touching on some of the things that he was able to accomplish being the Vice Chancellor of Nairobi University, is that he was called the Buffalo because of his fiery and energy that he had in tackling issues. That is why they had nicknamed him the Buffalo. But let's first of all hear some of the sentiments from one of the people who have been in the education sector for a number of years. Mark?
Yeah, thank you. The country is mourning a great man. Professor George Albert Omore Magoha was a great man in all spheres. And just like it has been said in that short documentary, Professor was a straightforward man. He had a clear thought structure, and he wanted things done the right way. And in the education sector, when he came in, I think we were a bit scared of his coming in, but we didn't know that he was coming to actually streamline a good number of things that had gone wrong. So today we mourn a man who has come and who came and breathed life in the sector of education. In the documentary, we've also heard that credibility of our national exams had really gone down. There was rampant exam cheating in this country. And some of us who managed to step to other countries for education symposias and conferences, there are so many, our results, our examinations were questionable to a very large extent. So his coming in actually gave us a new name. It gave us quite some acceptability in our neighborhood and internationally. And talking of him as one who would want to force the right thing to be done, which many people fear actually in the world today, Professor Magoha was a person who wanted the right thing done in the right way and at the right time. So at the education sector, I think we'll miss him. We even remember on the 10th of October 2022, when we had our post-World Teachers' Day conference at Kerugoya Church grounds in Kirinyaga. He was our guest of honor, a man who liked observing time. We did an invite to him and wanted him to be as our guest from 10 in the morning. And by 9:30 he was on the grounds. We had not had, the gatherings. The gathering had not even come. The people had not arrived. Most of the guests had not arrived, but he is a guest of honor who was already on the ground. So that shows a very disciplined, focused man who liked his work and did it in the best way possible. Thank you.
Dr. Musau,
yes,
how do you remember the good professor?
I remember the good professor, and my way of eulogizing him is that he was a great patriot, high-achieving academician, and it was quite a great pleasure for me to have joined the University of Nairobi panel of lecturers when he was the Vice Chancellor. And I remember his high sense and strict attention to duty. The fact that he was alcoholic, time conscious, coming into the office quite on time, in fact ahead of time, and working many hours, great work alcoholic. He recently, when he was the Cabinet Secretary in Education, I remember that he paid personal attention to the implementation of the curriculum-based competency system, and he personally superintended the construction and launching of the KBC classrooms throughout the country. He had a high sense of duty, and he led by giving great example. So he is not only a Sanchon, he is also a professor, an academician, and an administrator of very high standards of achievement. Yes.
And Daktari, your doctor, the good professor, also was a surgeon, and maybe you have rubbed shoulders over the course of your career. And just looking at Magoha, you know, you kind of wonder where to begin, because when you go to education matters, when you go to him being a surgeon, him being a technocrat, he always ticked all the right boxes. And yesterday we did talk to Dr. Walter Mwenda, who was the doctor who was with him until he died, and he said, well, it's hard to eulogize this guy. He was so, for lack of a better word, so perfect in what he did that everybody had to play catch up. How would you eulogize the late professor?
Thank you very much. First and foremost, it's a hero that we have lost. So the whole country is mourning, particularly the family, the two doctors, the wife and the son. During this difficult time, we tell them that we are sorry, and basically the life of the professor is something that cannot be eulogized, as many have said it. One thing that I will say about him is that he's a fine surgeon. You know, a surgeon doesn't gamble with the human body. So when you take your knife and you want to cut, then you will only cut what you know you're going to save the life of that particular person. On that note, the surgeon, the professor, applied the same technique in every aspect of his life where he has managed. For example, the university, when he was a vice chancellor, you know, he has managed it very well. Everybody knows the record that he has left behind. More so when he has moved to examination council, NEC, and also when he has gone to education. Actually, when he was given out education, when he was given or made the CS for education, I think that it was purposeful. Reason being, is a man whose record was very clear in terms of ensuring that academic papers are properly administered so that the future generation is left with good people. And one of the things that I remember about him is that when the CBC issue was, when created a lot of critics on the issue of CBC, our team and other educationists started saying that we have got the CBC prematurely. He used a very good phrase and said, if a baby is born at 7 months, you don't throw him away. You'll take him to an incubator, make sure that he grows until he reaches the lifetime that is expected to be out, and then he's released so that becomes a complete person. And you know, the examples that he uses are examples that are real in life. It's not, you know, it's not theoretical. It is something that when someone tells you about it, you can understand very well. A very common mother who has given birth to a child who prematurely understands what he meant. And in reference to what he meant in the CBC situation at that particular time, I think it was very clear that Kenyans were able to understand exactly with the situation of CBC, besides our academicians and our educationists who have a lot of information in terms of education, but to a common person might not be very clear with them. Professor just jumped and said, utatupa mtoto ambaye amezaliwa kabla hajafika wakati wake. You know, and then a common person, a mama who is in my village, Takaba, they are down there in Mandera West, will going to understand, oh, when a baby is born prematurely, he has to be taken into an incubator, which is equivalent to a uterus. I mean, that's how they are kept in the normal temperatures that are needed for a baby to grow in the fetus to grow in the uterus. And then once the baby reaches the right weights and the right, you know, required status, then the baby is moved out of the incubator and introduced outside. So that was a perfect, you know, example that he has used, and I think he has made great in terms of making sure he has demystified the whole issue of CBC, which most of us didn't understand very well. With that, we went a bit very far. The other thing is that, I mean, the professor as a surgeon, you know, he has played his part. He has left a lot of knowledge. He has left a lot of books, and all is not lost. He has played his part as a nationalist, he has played his part as a leader, he has played his part as an academician, and he has played his part in the society. And I think we'll live to refer or reference his knowledge that he has left behind in the years to come.
Indeed, Daktari, and it's a good thing that you've pointed out that he was very instrumental in midwifing the CBC. And Mark, let's now look at him during his life and time as the University of Nairobi Vice Chancellor. I'm quite sure Daktari here is very nostalgic on how the good professor was doing his thing. A lot of people don't realize that the very tall building at the University of Nairobi, the 22-story building, he's part of why it is standing today. How do you remember him as a Don?
One is that in describing Professor Magoha as an administrator who was tough but amiable, in proportionate, you know. Professor was a person who liked learners' time not to be wasted. Because before he came into the university, we had a lot of challenges on even the lecturers attending to their lectures, and Daktari here will confirm that. Workers had their free time to do whatever they wanted to do, and because of that, we had the students spend more time at the university than the expected time before he came in. But this is a professor who has come in and developed an infrastructure of consolidating the available time for the learners versus the planning structure. So when he came in, we saw literally reduction of the time compared to the past regimes before he's coming in for the learners. And the learners were able to come out probably having spent the time prescribed for them to be in universities. I know you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
Then two, we had a lot of unrests in universities. And we associate the professor with this infrastructure of CCTVs almost in all corners of the university. And the learners were able to be monitored, probably, and we were able to get to exactly who is this doing what. And therefore, people were not just apportioned blame for not having participated. And learners became a bit skeptical of getting into unnecessary, you know, wars with the administration. To the university students leaders, and you heard Osiani yesterday say something.
Yes.
That when he came in and he was elected the president of students at some point, and the professor invited him, and they shared. It was not only Osiani. There are several other leaders that were gelling very well with the professor on matters of students. And you see, the working together between the administration and the student leaders and the students created an opportunity for the two parties to be sharing the challenges between them. And you see, that is one thing that really reduced the unrest in the university and others. Of course, the University of Nairobi led, and the other universities followed. And so you realize the tenure of Professor Magoha is the one that initiated the reduction of unrest in universities. So Professor will be remembered for his immense contribution in streamlining time management at the university, streamlining discipline in the university, and enhancing relationships between learners and the administration. And that has gone on until today. Of course, today we have issues that rise, but they don't go to extreme ends where we have destruction of property and wastage of time. And that is something I'm sure even the dons who worked with the professor will accept, that was a very, very immense contribution from the late Professor Magoha.
A good point, Mark. Doc, and because you worked with Professor Magoha at the University of Nairobi, I do remember very well in the year 2002. Back then I was at the Technical University. Back then it was Kenya Polytechnic. And I remember the strikes that University of Nairobi had. You could polarize the whole Nairobi. And not only that, when you find University of Nairobi has gone to the streets, you found us also joining in. And Nairobi for 2-3 days was something that anybody wouldn't like. And that stalled a lot of things, including some of the semesters, sometimes because of those unrest. But when he came in, and it's a good thing that Mark has observed, David Osiani yesterday had an opportunity, he was a former CAS, had an opportunity to talk to him, and he said that, yes, indeed, there's a time they wanted to strike because of the shortage of beds at the University of Nairobi. And then, you know, the students, they had already gathered and wanted to start the strike. And then the good professor asked him, okay, fine, you're going to go to the street. Are you going to get those beds? And we look at the era of Magoha and schools unrest, and we see that indeed Nairobi became one of the best universities, even better in the region, because now there was sanity, there was discipline at the university.
Yes, the late Professor George Magoha actually led the University of Nairobi as Vice Chancellor from the year 2005 to the year 2015. And one of his key achievements in life was to transform the University of Nairobi from an institution that was known for student hooliganism, as we call it, to an institution that is now one of the top leading institutions of higher learning, not only in Kenya, but beyond. And as we have correctly observed, the University of Nairobi is able to compete quite favorably with other leading universities, not only in the country, within the African region, but also in the whole world. And this arose out of the professor's dedication to duty, human relationship. He was able to create great communication channels between the Office of the Vice Chancellor and the Students' Council, as well as the leadership of lecturers in the University of Nairobi, in particularly the WASO. And he held frequent meetings, not only with the Students' Council, but also with the leaders of the Lecturers' Union. And he also streamlined the administrative structures for the University of Nairobi so that if grievances arose from students or headquarters, they would be looked at and addressed comprehensively. And this is one of his key achievements. So it was a great pleasure to have worked with the late Professor Magoha. And at this time, we also remember that the professor's family has a double tragedy because his other brother, Professor Magoha, is also passed on recently, and his funeral is slated for this coming Saturday. So our greatest condolences, and we as the lecturers in the University of Nairobi will have to dig deep and borrow quite heavily from his administrative skills, internalize them and modify them to suit the changing circumstances. It was very difficult because I remember I was a student at the University of Nairobi from 1985 up to 1988 before I joined Kaplan Stratton as a pupil. And particularly because we had gone through the National Youth Service, when we came in we found Professor Joseph Mugai as the Vice Chancellor, and there was this transition of hooliganism. Our skills had been reinforced through the endurance program at the National Service. So we were able actually to stage great battles with the police and the General Service Unit. And it is quite unfortunate that the university was known as a place of hooliganism, and this continued for many years later, as you have observed, even in early 2000. But when the professor came in, he was able to use pragmatic means of dispute resolution and to engage students through effective communication. And this has helped to stabilize learning at the University of Nairobi.
Indeed. And Doc, looking still on discipline and how he was able to change the semantics and the working relationships between the university dons and the students, because you bear me witness that there was so much unrest in universities. He has been credited as one of the guys that would hold the bull by its horn when it comes to, and that is why he was nicknamed the Buffalo by the University of Nairobi students. And how he still maintained that to the time he was at the Kenya National Examination Council, and still took that fight to being a cabinet secretary in the Ministry of Education, which is one of the most demanding ministries in the country. Doc?
There are three things that I will associate with the professor that has basically made his success very successful or noticed. One is that the professor was all weather, all season. You could give him any job. He was a surgeon, but you could give him a job for administration. He picks up, and you think he's a trained administrator. Then you give him education. You think he's a trained teacher. You know, one thing that I have realized is that let me first capitalize on the lectest experiences that he had in the education sector when he was a CS. I mean, he could speak out very well, articulately, education issues. And you'll not feel like professor is not an educationist. The fact that you know he was a surgeon, but many people thought he was actually a professor of education. And the reason being, you see, he goes to the ground, he talks to the common person, the children who are in school. You see, part of his clips, you have realized that he has been in touch with the children at school. He listens to the children, he listens to the teachers, he listens literally to the workers, non-teachers in the institutions or in the schools. And the essence is that all those people there contribute largely to education. And his skills or technique of gaining his momentum was the fact that he involves everybody. And the moment he grasps the necessary information or the needs of that particular place, he strikes. And that's why he was called the Buffalo. Because he finds something and he knows it is the right thing, he goes for it. He doesn't gamble around. And that is what he did at the university. When he realized that, it was a curtail, at the university. Part of the lecturers, part of the student leaders were playing the game. And of course, as Doc has mentioned, they were also during their time, they were trained. You know, it's not during our time where we have just gone to the university from high school. They were military officers. They were already trained by NYS, so they were able, paramilitary. They were able to battle with the GSU and the regular police, and of course, understand the skills they're going to adapt. And that is the time when I used to hear, when I was in Kenyatta here, I used to hear the University of Nairobi students have picked the, you know, when the police officer throws the tear gas, they pick before it goes down, and they return back to the police. I mean, an ordinary person cannot do that. So the fact that they were trained, those are some few skills they gained from there. So I think the professor is someone, if you ask me in a simple word, is someone who was God sent to Kenya, and our leadership have also understood him very well from the onset of his career, and put him in the right place, because putting him in the learning institution for 10 years with all the knowledge that he came with, and making drastic change in that institution. Then afterwards, taking him to National Examination Council, where we had the biggest challenge, where people used to say the children of the top grade are the ones who only get A or B. Others are left outside. I mean, are they more knowledgeable? You know, people were asking. All those things were things which were not in the right place. But Professor went there and said, this is the way we mainstream, and that's where you find a child from the village down there in Igembe, gets A and leads the nation in in national examination. So that never happened before. Get back to history, and when you hear the children who have been in the top are the children of the people who are well-being and who are people who have you know, connections. But Professor came and said, we can explore this, give each and every child opportunity to explore his talent, and then eventually whatever he has put in place was real, and it became real. And now it is difficult to reverse. It is difficult to say a child who is born in a village, you know, there's a place called Banisa in Mandera. Down there, there's no road, there's nothing, it's a bordering Ethiopia. But children are getting B, A minus. We have not still seen A, but B, A minus, and the last child gets C plus or C. I mean, it has never happened. That has been before an area where there is no education. It's known that if you must have a child who will do very well in national examination, you must bring him up country where there are good facilities. But that was not the case. It was just the opportunity was not available, and the necessary guide and the necessary scholastic materials were not provided. But when the professor says a child in Nairobi and the one in that place must have the same materials, and he meant it and it was done, I mean, we are seeing the fruit, and we are repeat that. The other thing that he has left behind is that he has trained a lot of doctors. I mean, his legacy continues. All those surgeons that he has trained, you know, all experts that he has trained in his field of nephrology. So the professor has left a great legacy. Is someone that will keep on someone to be remembered. For sure, for the rest of our life that we know, we will keep on remembering the professor, not because of his presence, but because of the legacy he left behind. And we always look forward to leaving something that will benefit the society whenever you are given an opportunity within the society. So he has done that, and we hope that we ourselves will going to do the same and change our minds and leave something for the society before we are also taken up by our creator. Thank you.
And still picking it from where you've talked about is that Professor Magoha, published more than 60 peer-reviewed publications and supervised to completion over 40 Master of Medicine, that is surgery, students. So if we look at anybody who had an opportunity to study under Magoha, then we are talking about hundreds or thousands. And when you talk about his work at the ministry, we are talking about millions of Kenyans who he touched directly or indirectly. Mark, looking at the Kenya National Examination Council, I do remember there's a time, and even now, in some spheres, you hear that nilipata B, ya Matiang'i, or nilipata A ya Matiang'i, or something, because there was that paradigm shift in how examinations were being conducted in the country. And few people forget that, a lot of people forget that during that tenure, Magoha was the chairman of the Kenya National Examination Council. He's the one who did the mopping up at the council to ensure that our examinations are very credible. Being an educationist, I would like you to comment on that.
There was a wonderful combination at the time when Professor Magoha was at NEC. And that time there was a Dr. Fred Matiang'i in education.
Yes.
These two great sons of Kenya worked very well in their respective positions. And I think one was preparing for the other. And so when Professor was at NEC, you'll remember that initially we used to have a lot of time being spent on marking of exams. A lot of time, months and months. And to a level where a Form 4 student would do exams and is home for 2 to 3 months without even knowing what the results are. Parents for the primary school learners were also left in that suspense for quite some time. It is during Magoha's time that he really reduced that time for primary schools to weeks. Actually, an exam is concluded in like the last exam that was released this year by our good CS, the current CS, Mr. Ezekiel Machogu. The exam was completed on, was it on
23rd?
For the primary. talking about the primary.
Yes,
I think 7th around, and then it was released before the end of the year. Now the secondary KCSE was concluded on 23rd, as rightfully put by Daktari here, December, and it was released exactly in a month's time. In fact, less than a month. And when that started, you know, there were lots of complaints. I remember the institution I worked for, or I work for today, was one of the complainants over the period of time spent on marking, moderating, and release of exams versus the quality. We all know that everybody fears, not everybody, but very many people fear change, you know, particularly when it's sudden. But when Prof introduced that, and year after year, people began embracing and accepting that this could be the right thing to be done. And today, everybody knows, and whoever has come in, Mr. Machogu, I think will ride on the same legacy that he left. Concerning cheating, and you know, that is the administration of exams now, where we had people peddling, you know, these fake papers on the street, the back streets, and selling them to the learners. I think we commendably saw that one reduce. There was instant, you know, action for those ones that were caught, you know, practicing that. And people feared, you know, engaging in the cheating that was being done. I also happen to have worked very closely with NEC in several portfolio, and we realized that even the storing, the release, and the receiving of the exams from all over the country, you know, the approach has changed. And therefore there was minimized, you know, leakages that would lead to exam malpractices. And I think these things may not just happen at once. I think he developed a culture that has grown, and where we are now, we are at, presumably, we can talk over 96%. And moving on, if the person who has come in will want to follow, you know, some of the, you know, the framework that he has laid down, then we'll have best, if not better, management of exams in our country. Doc here said we have, we were used to hearing these A's from, you know, these known national institutions, those that can be accessed by the haves. And you remember in this exam there was a joke that was going around when a school deep in the village of one of the schools in Nyanza had several A's, and people were wondering, how can such a school produce these very many A's? Which is a very bad mindset, you know, because Prof provided an opportunity for equal, you know, equal access of the necessary infrastructure for the learners to be able to put out their best talent in examinations. And I remember I got a phone call 2-3 days ago. A boy in my village, in a village school, got a stand A. And that was it's called breaking the glass ceiling. That had never been seen. That is just a local school.
And it was breaking news in that village.
Yes, it was breaking news. We and we are still celebrating. I just hope we'll be able to find ways of enabling him proceed to the next level of education. But you see, that is what this country needed several years back, where we have education as a preserve for a few, and having the rest of the Kenyans being subjected to condemn, as in they are not able to do what others are able to do. That doesn't go well with the IFA, Education for All goals, that talks of access, you know, quality and affordable education for all in the world. And the Sustainable Development Goal number 4, that encourages that all countries of the world should provide quality, affordable and accessible education to all. So Professor was a great man who, in his thinking, and having realized where he came from, and having wanted to provide for the persons who would not have as equal opportunity as others in the world, that he would create an opportunity that any person who has the ability could access and thrive. And that is what we celebrate him for. For us, we continuously say that great men like Professor Magoha don't die. They change into beautiful red flowers that multiply and beautify the world. So Magoha is not dead. Magoha is still alive, and his legacy lives on because of the many good things he did, because of the many doctors he trained, because of the many, academic that he supervised to fruition that are going to help this world move to the next level. And that is how we will celebrate him for the rest of our life.
And let me go now to Dr. Musao. It's a good thing that in every discussion that we have to touch, the CBC is very passionate. And he himself, I would say, was one of the most passionate, despite the fact that there was a lot of resistance, even political interference. And you do remember that the good professor even rubbed shoulders with the wrong way with the politicians because of the CBC. And he maintained his stand. He visited the schools. He oversaw some of the classrooms being built himself. I do remember a day that he would storm into a school. The school is not well prepared. They didn't know the good professor was coming. The education CS was coming. And they were caught flat-foot. And he did not even say, media, kaeni kando kidogo, I need to talk to these people. He would actually talk to those people right there where the media was there. And some people talked about he was a little bit abrasive. But that was his nature. That was his character. And the CBC is one of the things, just as Mark has said, will live on forever because of Magoha.
Yes, the professor paid strong attention to detail. He personally superintended the implementation of the CBC program. And I think even this panel meeting that we have eventually made in terms of implementation, looking at reasonableness, that drive and even the commitment by the current government, the president, to the CBC is actually a reflection of the drive, the strong drive that the professor pushed this because he was committed to it. He had sold it throughout the Republic, and most people had already embraced it, not knowing that there could be significant challenges. And when the new regime came into power, we are glad that they have embraced the same spirit, that it is a great curriculum, that it is very important for the country to embrace this competence-based curriculum, which will help mold the young people into graduates who have already known their competencies from as early as primary, junior secondary, and as they go into senior secondary, they will have prepared themselves. So the professor was quite helpful. He personally fought for the CBC, and he put his foot forward towards its implementation. And as I had said earlier, I remember several occasions when, as you correctly put it, when he personally attended to inspection of schools to assess their preparedness for the CBC. And these sent shivers down the spine for all education administrators in this country. And as we speak now, when the junior secondary is being hosted at the primary school ground, a lot of preparations has gone in. At least the messenger had sunk into education administrators, the teachers who are the main pillars for the implementation of this program. And we as stakeholders, the communities, the parents, the children themselves, the students, the pupils in primary and secondary schools are already aware. And the boards of management of primary and secondary schools have internalized this. And it is going to be quite easy to convert the existing facilities to start the process from the current situation, whereby there could be limitations, of course, because you cannot get resources immediately. But I'm sure despite the constraints of resources, because of the high commitment and the drive that the professor put into this system, this CBC is going to be successful. And the boards must be charged with the responsibility at the primary school level of ushering in the junior secondary, and I'm glad the government has given regulations on the establishment of boards of management of these junior secondary schools within the primary schools, while within the next 2 years, this program will roll out into the existing secondary schools. So the boards of management at the existing secondary schools in this country should start expanding the facilities so as to ensure that when junior secondary gets to the secondary school level in 2 years' time, they are ready and prepared to host these students at the secondary school. So the facilities would involve science laboratories, dormitories need to be expanded, and of course workshops for the junior secondary curriculum, which is now going to roll out into the secondary schools. And at the moment, for those primary schools which do not have adequate workshops or science laboratories, I think the education department should be able to give directions so as to ensure that the facilities within the neighboring secondary schools are available for use by the junior secondary school students in the primary schools before the primary schools or the junior secondary schools within the primary schools are able to construct and equip their own laboratories and workshops.
Indeed. Dr. Isaac, you're also a politician. And let's look at the good professor. He has worn so many hats. He is a surgeon, he is a professor, he was an educationist, he was a chairman of the Kenya National Examination Council. While we are talking about CBC, and earlier on I mentioned and said that we have been politicizing almost everything in this nation. But the good professor steered clear of political waters until his death. Despite the many challenges that the CBC came up with, including from politicians, others talking about we're gonna do this for CBC, we're gonna do this, but the professor steered clear of political waters. I'd like you to comment on that.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, the greatness of a person is determined by the legacy he leaves behind. And therefore the professor basically remains one of the great people that we will live to remember. In terms of his way of relating to politicians, I think he crossed the boundary of politicians at the onset of his vetting, where he said, why did you want to become a CS? And he said, I mean, I don't look for jobs, jobs look for me. And that was the answer he gave. And that is being confident, that is being knowing what you want to do, and that is being explicit and informing the interviewer or the vetting team that it's not about looking for a job. It's the passion that you have, that you want to take forward and also deliver and provide services to the nation. And when he proved that, first and foremost, they kept a space for him after he has been approved. You remember there are others who are not approved in that vetting. One of the PSS who was promoted to be a CS was not approved in that vetting. But when everybody, the way the political situation was at that particular time, every Kenyan thought that, no, Professor has missed the point. He has crossed line with politicians, and therefore he will not going to be approved. And you know, he was the first one who was approved. The fact that his record proved that it's not about what you tell people. It's about what you are able to deliver. So I think politicians from that onset, they were very careful with him, and whenever they wanted to pick up an issue with him, they must research well, because he will have an answer, he will have answers for them. And before they realize that actually they were on the wrong side, everything has already been cleared. So basically, the professor was also a politician. Don't keep him away from politics. Reason being, the way he has contained the politicians on the issue of education and education matters. And during that time, you know, there was the issue of BBI. And politicians were fighting, you know, like the bullfighters from all sides. And anything that perhaps the government will want to introduce, 3/4 of them will want to go against that. And the fact that Professor said, this has nothing to do with your BBI, this has nothing to do with the politics of the day, this has all to do with our children and the generation to come. And therefore, when we are doing this, we leave it for the experts, not for the politicians. Their part will come only when the experts have cleared the space, is when the politicians will come to make sure that they do the necessary legislative role that they must play. But in terms of ensuring that education matters, we leave it for the expert. And that's what he did. And the fact that his background was purely science, you know, he could address everything scientific. And science doesn't want theories. Science wants proof. So if you can't prove, it is no longer science. So you can't talk about it. And politicians never prove anything. They will just want to, they're seasonal. They want to interrogate and want to just ask anything that comes up their way. Sometimes you'll even find some of them are so naive on what they are talking about, and when them themselves flash back on the statement they made, they actually feel guilty. And it is a practice that he has introduced, the professor, that before you open out or you open up your mouth, please do the necessary checks. Materials are available. Professor Gogol is there. There are other people who can also guide you, who are experts in that field. You can go and consult them. But the bottom line is that as you will want to echo information, as you want to share information with the nation, please research it well before you come out. So the professor was a man, he was a scientist who could just tell you that nothing will go without being tested. So once you test it and we prove that it is something workable, there's no any other debate about it, there's no other politicking. It has to be done. And that the slogan of his buffalo comes in now. That once he has proved it is there, the buffalo has to crush it. You know, the buffalo doesn't look at even the tree. Once he charges, he crushes everything on the road. And that is the professor we knew. And he left his legacy. We will just say, let him rest in peace.
Glowing tribute even here on our social media fan page. But before we do that, let me introduce our fourth panelist. We are strengthening our bench, Engineer Crispus Wadiba, who is a leadership and governance expert. Engineer, karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My apologies for being late.
No problem. Now, as you gather your thoughts, let me sample some of your responses here. Betty 386, you are watching. Barasa Headship, you say headship, beg your pardon, our leader, fare thee well. Peter Kiava, good work, 100%. That is in regards to what the professor was doing, and he says condolences to the family of the greatest man. Hashtag Magoha. Vosta, you say thank you for sharing. Ken Kips Ruto says my condolences to the family of the professor. And also, who else? Cyprus Awar, keep up the good work. Noel Kibet Kasewo, you say my condolences to the family. We are eulogizing our good Professor George Magoha, who passed on yesterday in the evening. And we have just a few minutes. I'm going to give those minutes to engineers to give us what he remembers the good professor with. Of course, a lot can be talked about the good professor before we shift now the gears to some bits of politics at the top of the hour. Engineer, karibu sana.
Thank you so much. For me, just two areas I want to reflect on the legacy of the professor. One is in dealing with the cheating, especially of the exams. But it's sad that now these issues are emerging, especially in this recent examination. And we hope that the people he left there to steer the education sector in the country can remember him by making sure that these issues don't reemerge at all. It's very sad to hear that there are elements of cheating coming about. The other issue is I want to reflect him through the eyes of the children, the CBC pioneer class, to whom they really relied upon the professor's good sight and direction on where the CBC program is supposed to go. Unfortunately, as I speak to you today, my child who did the KBC exam, they haven't received their results. So there are issues that definitely professor was able to handle when he was there, which maybe the people who are in office right now are not able to handle. So I just want to pray that as we remember the professor, can also we make sure that protect the work that he did, the work that he really treasured and worked so hard to build in terms of making this education sector better than destroying it because he has just left. Thank you.
And another thing, you are also a politician, and Magoha steered clear of the murky waters of politics, despite him being the Buffalo, as he was christened back in his years at the University of Nairobi. And he had a lot of things to look into, and especially bringing in the CBC that has not yet hit the ground quite well as it should. But he was adamant that this is going to work, and he steered that to where now we are. We have our pioneer.
You know, it's what we call leadership. You know, sometimes when you're a leader, the masses may not see what you're seeing, and that's what makes you a good leader. So for him, he would see, I want to take Nairobi University to this level, and he would do whatever it takes to take Nairobi University to the level of greatness that he took that university at that time. The same thing with the issue of dealing with cheating. He knew very well that the issue of the trust deficit we have as a country, I'm going to deal with it. And he was able to get the support, the political support he got from the president and the minister in charge at that time to deal with the issue of cheating. When it came to CBC, we knew very well we need to change the way we teach our children today. The future of generation of this country cannot rely on the old education system. He knew very well that has to change. But the beauty of it is that he had the energy and the drive to drive his agenda. And as you say, the bull, once he saw what he wants to achieve, he drove forward and nothing would stop him. And I think that really helped him. And I hope the people who want to fit into issues can really borrow one or two areas of his strength so that we can become a better country. One of the things he said when he was being interviewed is that, don't vet me because I'm a Jalu to go and represent the Siaya County in this cabinet. Vet me as a Kenyan to go and represent Kenyans in the cabinet, to work for them. Because when we bring the intelligence of every community in this country, we can become better. So we need to make sure that we have leaders in future who are devoid of tribalism, community biases, people who are focused on building a country. Because if you're able to build a country, everybody will benefit.
Indeed. Let me, gentlemen, give you a minute each to just tell Kenyans what are some of the lessons that we can hold on that the good professor left us or has left us with. Beginning with you, Mark. A minute.
Yeah, Professor Magoha was very philanthropic. You'll remember that he walked across the country, flashing out learners who had qualified to join Form 1, but were not able to because of various reasons. We saw him in the non-formal sectors, settlement sectors, across this country, everywhere. He was going for them and bringing them to school and initiating the 100% transition policy by government. That was a good one. He was a firm leader, but he was very fatherly. You know, he would say this is the right thing that must be done, but at the same time he was extremely fatherly. He would treat the aspect of what he was pursuing with a lot of passion. And I'm sure even the corrections he was making to the persons he interacted with who were on the wrong at some later stage, and I have a testimony to that, he would still call the persons and tell them this was wrong, this was supposed to be done this way, can you change? Professor was very patriotic. He was a nationalist. He was Kenya for him. it was not just like engineer said here. He was not a Siaya, he was not a Luya in him or a Luo in him. He's a person who wanted to bring out his best for the nation. And finally, he was very respectful to authorities. You know, he kept on saying, this is an assignment I've been assigned by the head of state, and I must ensure it is properly executed. So that demonstrates that Professor is a person who really respected authorities and wanted to do things as properly assigned.
Indeed. And we need to take a quick break so that we may now come back with the second hour where we are discussing matters politics. You do remember a lot has been transpiring when you talk about matters politics. Yesterday, the tribunal that is investigating 4 commissioners who have been christened the Cherera 4 had their sitting, and the man of the moment, outgoing IEBC chair Wafula Chebukati, was there to give some of his insight in what exactly transpired in the 2022 succession politics. That is, we'll be forming part of what we will be discussing, and more specifically also we will be touching a few on counties, because they're quite quiet, if you ask me. Some have quite hit the ground running, but some are kind of having a few challenges here and there. But let's have that quick break. I'll be back with my panelists. Welcome back. Just in case you just joined us, this is KBC News Check, and on this second hour we are talking about matters politics of the day, and a lot is currently happening in the country. And allow me to reintroduce my panelists here. Beginning from my immediate left, we have Engineer Crispus Wadimba, who is a leadership and governance expert. Just next to him we have Dr. Isaac Hassan, who is also a political and governance expert. Next to him we have Dr. Benjamin Musau, who is an advocate of the High Court, and it's a good thing that he has ever worked at the University of Nairobi with the late professor who we have just eulogized. And just next to him we have Marco Seno, who is a senior executive director of communication and administration at the Kenya National Union of Teachers. He has also worked closely with the late professor. He is on my extreme left. Gentlemen, karibuni tena.
Thank you.
Now, looking at what is currently happening in the country, I think when you talk about matters politics, all eyes are IEBC, electoral reforms, our legislators, and especially in Mombasa. And I would like that to form basis of our discussion right now. And beginning with you, Engineer, looking at what happened yesterday, we carried that whole session that the IEBC, the outgoing IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati gave an account of what transpired, and especially when it came to the 15th of August, when we were expecting the results to be announced. And some damaging report came out of the 2 sessions with the commissioners, and also yesterday with the chairman. He said that the National Security Council, Advisory Council, wanted to twist or twerk the results to favor a certain candidate, or who we know the side that that candidate was. But away from that, that is quite a damaging report coming from a chairman to a state. We are supposed to work hand in hand. In as much as IEBC is independent, it is also has to work with the government. And yesterday's remarks, I'm quite sure it has formed basis of discussion. You remember, the president talked about there were some attempts on Chebukati's life, and earlier on, the day before yesterday at Kamukunji, the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga said that we have a dossier. I won with over 2 million votes. Everybody is keeping their cards close to their chest. The president is not diverging more on that, and the former Prime Minister is not also diverging much. But as a country, we are just seated, we are rooted, we're just hearing this from this side, this from this side, this from this side.
Well, they say power is not given, it's taken. So most likely there were attempts to grab power by one side or the other. But the truth will definitely come out slowly by slowly. The unfortunate thing is that the murkiness and the ugliness of how this politics is really being laid to bear. And it's very sad that Kenyans spend billions and billions of shillings. We lose a lot of economic opportunities during an election season. Our country suffers huge because of the tension that we go through, and yet the final outcome can be determined by a few men over a conversation about money and rewards and all manner of things. So it's very, very sad that these things are coming to bear. But then also it should give us an opportunity as a country to look back and say, this whole electoral process, what is it about? Do we really need to go through an election? That's one question we need to ask ourselves. And if we go through an election, how should the outcome be? How should we take that outcome? Because right now, as much as Chebukati is saying all these things, also the other side will also say something. They'll be definitely rejoinders. So we don't know how the other side will respond. But definitely things will come to bear. They are also, not everybody is coming to this panel with clean hands. What is very sad is that Kenyans went to vote with clean hands to vote leaders, but what they got probably is not what they voted for. But we pray and believe that from this whole interrogation, something positive can come out that can help us to become better in the coming general election and in future elections as we choose our leaders. But what is definitely showing, being demonstrated, that on the August of 9th, Kenyans voted, but subsequent days, many unfortunate things happen that we should be, as a country, get worried. Yes.
Dr. Isaac, looking at the report by our Wafula Chebukati yesterday, is the first commissioner or the first chairman to complete his full term since we started matters electoral, since the Zacchaeus Chesoni era to date. And I would really equate Chebukati to the late professor. He had a thick skin. The professor had a thick skin, and so is Wafula Chebukati. And what are some of the lessons that we can learn from all this fiasco? Remember, Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission is the only commission in the country that bears the tag as independent. But looking at the 2022 succession politics, we realized that it was not quite independent as it should be. Now we have a clean slate to start afresh. After the tribunal is done, and after the recommendations are done, we will be having the whole exercise of recruiting a new chairman and new commissioners. And remember, the president, the day before yesterday, did sign the IEBC amendment bill into law, which now creates a framework to ensure that now we have set the foundation of recruitment of the chair and the IEBC commissioners.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I think Wafula Chebukati, the chair of IEBC, as you mentioned, he has developed a thick skin, as like we mentioned earlier on, the professor. But I would like to mention some few things that has made him develop that thick skin in terms of electioneering process. First and foremost, Chebukati did one election, and the election that was presidential election that was cancelled, so he did the second round. So those two elections gave him greater lessons, and he built on those lessons and moved forward and decided to deliver to Kenyans as he exits the commission. And he wanted to leave legacy, and he knew what he wanted. For 2022 election, he said nothing to be compromised. Each and everything must be done the way it's supposed to be intended to do. And he started from the grassroots, where he initiated a clear system at the polling stations. And the whole electioneering issues starts from polling stations. All this other framework that happens at the top here does not usually influence the end result of any election. So Chebukati decided to ensure that everything at the polling station is in place, and it was in order, so that the moment he receives information trickling in from polling stations to the county election managing center to the national tallying center, then he knew by the time it is getting to him, all those informations that comes to him are accurate and they are informations that can be referred to. So he ensured that at the grassroots level, everything is in place. And he asked politicians, play your game at the grassroots level. Forget about up here. There's nothing that these commissioners can do for you. And he insisted that as he exits, he should leave that legacy. Thank God he has left that legacy, and we applaud him and we are proud of him for that particular work he has played. The second thing that he has played, which was very critical in making decision, was that he decided to upload all the results immediately he has received on the portals. So when you are feeding in information into a system, you cannot interrupt that system. But when you wait all the information to come and then load them once, you have opportunity to alter it. So for being very transparent and ensuring that no one will going to ask any question in regards to whatever that has come from the grassroots to the national tallying center and what has been uploaded in the portal, he has also kept that in place. So he has used technology to save most of things that will have bothered him and will have been questioned on. Thirdly, the third thing that he has put in place is that he ensured each constituency results that has reached the National Tallying Center was verified by all chief agents as well as the commissioners, and they signed on it individually. So they never had any query. When you do things one by one and you don't know what is coming next, you are able to do just because you know, even if you had other preference, your preference will be based on what is coming next, but not what is already has been uploaded and has been signed. So where the disconnect came, and I can sense from where, as a politician, I can sense where, yesterday when he was justifying, I can sense the point where he was speaking his point from, is that the commissioners never had any disagreement with us because themselves were spearheading in reading the results of every constituency once it is verified, signed by the chief agents of each political party, presidential candidate. And if that has been done, then for him he was safe, he was playing safe. Then when he was interrupted by the previous, Azimio team who were in the system, and he said, we still don't have the result of presidency. I can't say that the president's result is either this side or this side until he receives everything. And he waited until he receives everything. And as he mentioned very clearly, with the exception of one commissioner, the one who currently is facing the tribunal,
Real Masit,
all others agreed with the demand of the leaders who came there. And of course, there was also the national security he has mentioned, which it's very unfortunate. I mean, our national security should not be involved in electioneering process other than keeping peace. They should not be interfering with the basic things. I do not want to go that direction, but what I'm trying to bring out is that I think he has played his card very well to the last minute, to the extent that the few polling stations that remained wouldn't have determined or changed his decision on what was in the portal, which was visible to all Kenyans, which was visible to all candidates, which was visible to everybody in the world, because you could access the portal and know exactly the president has this president, this candidate had this other candidate had this. So the 24 polling station, the 24 constituencies that were remaining wouldn't have made significant change, even if they would have added for the person of their preference, those people who were pushing for that. But what he did was, even the 24, after the result was out, unless you wanted to alter it, through scrupulous means, you couldn't have changed the result, because whatever the current president got on those 24 constituencies was sufficient enough to make him get 51 plus 1 vote. And he got to 250 something votes, not 1 vote. After 50%, he got 250 something thousand votes, which means even if those 258,000 or whichever figure, I can't remember exact figure, but 250 plus votes were added to the other side, the Azimio side, and only one vote is just left for the 50 plus one vote. Still they will have been beaten because mathematics they don't lie. You know, the percentage was already at 50, the other one was at 48, so there's no way you can cross the bridge with 250,000 votes to get to 51, because 50 is already blocked. What we were talking about was the top, and he only needed a vote, one. And definitely all those 24 constituencies wouldn't have missed one vote to make sure that he has crossed, because one of the demands that they made was either they announce in favor of Azimio or they do rerun. You know, so I think Chebukati is a man who proved to Kenyan that even if you have no much strength, you can be defeated by the system. You can also play your game smartly. He has played his game smartly and emerged victorious.
He's being admired.
Absolutely.
Of course, the Azimio side is not quite happy about that.
Absolutely.
But looking at electoral reform, Dr. Musau, I'm looking at what even the former premier and Azimio chief Raila Odinga talked about, that they would want an independent forensic audit on the 2022 elections. And I remember when IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati was giving an account of how that was a report that he released last week on how the 2022 elections were. He says, indeed, we need some electoral reforms in IEBC, and talked about a number of issues, including security for the commissioners and a number of factors. Do you believe, as an officer of the court, that we do need another IEBC amendment bill? Because the one that we have passed just touches on the framework of how we are going to recruit the IEBC chairman and the commissioners. And another thing, should we wait for the tribunal, the Agri Muchelule tribunal, to complete its task before we can embark on a whole clean IEBC?
Thank you very much. Before we come to the issue of reforms, I would like to commend my learned friend, Mr. Wafula Chebukati, for the thick skin, for managing his full term. I think that is a great achievement in the Kenyan system, because we have had his predecessors who have had a lot of challenges, including health challenges, because of the pressure and the stress that has been put into this office. I am quite happy that Chebukati has come out as a sharp leader who is bold, particularly bold, because when it came to the question of announcement of the 2022 presidential election results, there was doubt that the chairman could announce the results in a situation whereby he was leading a minority faction within the commission of 3 against 4. And I think he came out quite bold. He is an effective decision maker, and that is something which is very important in leadership. You have to make a decision on a self-basis based on the actual and apparent authority which is bestowed on your office, and his interpretation was later on confirmed by the Supreme Court that the chairman has the legitimate authority to pronounce the results as long as they have gone through the system of verification within the IEBC as a corporate entity. It is a great pity that the Kenya IEBC is not the independent constitutional commission that we anticipated under the Constitution of Kenya 2010. The constitutional commissions collectively form the fourth arm of government. They are not part of the executive, the legislature, or the judiciary. And therefore, they should not only well, they came in because the three traditional arms of government that we knew in history and civics do not provide the adequate checks and balances that are required to spur economic development, to spur efficiency in the provision of public services by government to the people. And this is where the independent commissions are coming in. And for the IEBC, it is an independent commission within a very important aspect of governance, which is electoral democracy, the vindication of the right of the people to choose their representatives, the people who represent them in the devolved parliament, for example, and also the people who lead the executive, which manifests itself through the two levels of government, the nation level through the presidency and the county level through the governors and others. And therefore, it is quite important. Particular lessons have come out of these 2022 elections, especially on the system of verification, the operational efficiency of the IEBC as a corporate entity, and the superintendence of the IEBC by the commissioners, the individual commissioners individually, and the commission or the commissioners as a collective body who should exercise collective responsibility in decision making. And because of those lessons, whereby there was a sharp division, which almost led to a lot of chaos, and I thank the people of Kenya for their resilience in a situation like this, it is necessary for us to re-examine the entire structure of the IEBC as a corporate organ, as an institution, and apply proper rules of corporate governance into that structure, so that we know very well what is the role and the province of the CEO, for example, and the day-to-day management of the employees, and what are their specific responsibilities, so as to put the commissioners at the policy making level and the supervision of the day-to-day managers. And of course, it would be very important to borrow elsewhere, and we can't go very far because we have internationally accepted rules on corporate governance. We also know how businesses run. For example, in most well-run companies, you will find that there is a non-executive board of directors and an executive team, which is divided into particular areas of expertise. For example, you'll have the finance team headed by a finance manager or finance director. You have the human resource division and other divisions, and the CEO is in charge of all these divisions and reports to the board.
And do you believe that we need to wait for Justice Aggrey Mucholule Commission to wrap up and come with the deliberations on whether the only remaining commissioner, Irene Masit?
Not necessarily, although it is likely to, the Mucholule Tribunal is likely to give some good advices or opinions on how this can be done. But we already have the decision of the Supreme Court and the advisory opinion on some of the lapses and some of the things which need to be fixed. And we also know the complaints that came from Azimio, and we already know what happened. And it is a great pity that someone can sit in an office and make a decision which overrides the people of Kenya, or is suspected to have made that decision. This should not be allowed to happen. So based on what we already know, I think the president should be able and the country should be able to move forward and develop a reform program. And that reform program could learn from the decision in the Muchelule Tribunal in due course, because that one will come out quite shortly.
All right.
Yeah.
Mark, looking at what the former Premier had, he called it a consultative meeting at the historic Kamkunji grounds. He did mention a number of things that they want. Of course, IBC reforms were one of them, forensic audit was one of them. But there's another thing that he said that would quite resonate very well with Kenyans, because he said, hey, we call Kenyans to resist and demand removal of punitive taxes in unga, fuel, bus, fare, paraffin, school textbook, blah, 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 and still keep going and going. This could resonate well with Kenyans. You do remember that the president was elected on the hustler narrative. And now, if the former premier is talking about consultative meetings, we do remember what happened in 2017. Those consultative meetings degenerated into some things like even asking Kenyans to not buy some certain commodities. And we do know how these things work. If we talk about those consultative meetings could degenerate into something else, I'd like to pick your mind on that.
Thank you. Let me begin from slightly mentioning something on these electoral reforms and what is happening at the IEBC. I'll begin by appreciating Kenyans, for turning out in large numbers and exercising their democratic constitutional right of casting their votes. And from the initial stages, what happened in the elections of 2022, from the onset, came out to be one of the most peacefully conducted elections in Kenya for a very long time. You'll remember that before constitutional reforms were done, we used to have elections conducted in a manner that the candidate was the referee, he was the judge, and therefore he would be in the position of leadership for as long as he wished. And the coming in of constitutional reforms, and more particularly the formation of these independent constitutional commissions in the chapter 15 of our constitution, is something that came in to sanitize some of the happenings within the anatomy of our country. And then secondly, join the rest of my colleagues in a way, congratulating the chairman, emeritus of IBC, for having a thick skin. In fact, there wasn't much in 2022 for him. In 2017, it was worse. You remember, there's a time the members of the commission were calling on him to resign. You remember?
Yeah.
That you are seated as a commission, and then one of you is out there saying, can you resign from that position? And you're the chair. And so, he is a very calm person who everyone thought would break in between, the process, but he managed to wade through to the end. I want to say that the Article 10 of our Constitution, talking about fundamental rights and freedoms, which includes freedom of expression, interaction, speech, and the rest, is one very good thing that happened to Kenya in the 2010 Constitution. And having listened to what members from different sides in the Muchelule tribunal speak, that is freedom. People are speaking of what they saw and what they had. This would not be a thing you would hear in the past. And I'm sure the learned counsel here would confirm that hitherto, from that time, we now have a lot of that space where we can express ourselves and speak of what happened and what we saw that we feel is right or wrong, respectively. Now, my question, maybe as I conclude on this IBC issue, is we've had several reports being presented to this country, coming from the background of the bungled elections we had in the past, purportedly bungled, if I may use that. But you remember in 2017 we had the Supreme Court annulling an election. So we have those reports that were provided, and they were supposed to be part of the framework that would help sanitize the electoral process in this country. We talked of the Kregler report. We talked of the Waki report, if they are within our memory. Now, the question is, what effect do they have to the subsequent electoral cycles that we have in this country? Because when you listen to what was being said, or what continuously gets to be discussed in the tribunal, we seem to be getting back to some of the issues that were mentioned.
Back in the years.
Which we should be talking of as having been settled. Because, you know, we learn from these mistakes, and once we learn from them, we are supposed to be developing from there. This we did last time, let us not do it, let us move to the next level. Until when shall we be talking about the same thing in the electoral cycle? And the engineer asked, what would be the need of persons waking up very early and lining, you know, to go and cast their votes the whole day? And then it comes out that there is somebody who wants to, in one way or another, alter the will of the people. If that is indeed the words that are being said. And having heard from the three commissioners, the chairman emeritus, Gulo, and the other one, Professor, you know, we also respect that the same constitution provides for, that Article 50 provides for fair hearing of both parties within the disagreement. And so we are yet to hear more. Of course, there is that confidence that is still silent. We've not heard what happened the other side or what the other persons are saying. To me, I would really want to hear what Masit would say. Because Masit is a learned counsel, and I think there is something that is in her that the nation is waiting.
And not only Masit,
yes,
we need to hear from all the commissioners their side of the story of what happened in the 2022 succession politics.
Yes.
We would love to hear that. Although some did...
some chickened out. So
yes,
we
and
may not have an
looking
opportunity
at the time,
to hear them.
yesterday, Mamkwechu Nani was doing around 1 hour, 30 minutes, Chebukati. But I believe there's a lot that we didn't hear from Chebukati. And I think these guys should be compelled. Everyone who was under that, who was supervising that election,
fact,
including all the commissioners, despite the fact that they resigned, they can tell us exactly what happened.
My thought is whether the judgment, the Supreme Court judgment, is being vacated by the discussions we are having at the tribunal. That is my question, and the whisper from the learned counsel here is they are not vacating. And so, when we look at that squarely, we get to understand that we would even need a commission of inquiry to have everybody on board. Let us hear all the filth that occurred in the elections of 2022. Probably is going to heal us as we move forward. Because everybody has what to say. When somebody says, somebody was talking of ex nihilo nihil fit. No, you can't discuss what is not there. And I remember listening to Council Korir, Donald Kip Korir, trying to push the ex nihilo nihil fit to all the commissioners that he talked to. What is this you are talking that was supposed to be altered when you had not disclosed the results? So I think the interest of Kenyans, and I want to plead with Kenyans all over this country to continue maintaining that the peaceful approach, regardless of the many political formations we'll have in this country, to first of all understand what is ailing us, what is the cancer in the election cycle. Once we get to understand that cancer, then we'll be better placed to understand how to handle other elections moving forward.
Engineer.
Now coming to your question, I had not answered.
Oh yes, there's a bit you haven't cleared.
Yes, there's something you said. You talked of the cost of life and the promises in the respective manifestos of the contestants in the gone general election and what is happening now. Now, in our short break, we were trying to share here with the Daktari and engineer here over if there is a possibility of isolating between policy and politics in this country. Because anytime we are faced with an election in this country, which seems not to be breaking, because already people are campaigning for 2027 today. That means we are not able to even have time to put action in the policies we formulated politically so that it benefits the Kenyan citizen. But the question is this: When we came out and said we are going to reduce the cost of living, what were we referring to? What were we referring to as politicians? Because the cost of living is not an event reduction. It's a process. Kenya being an agrarian economy, we don't just wake up and say, today you're going to sell a packet of flour at 80 shillings. You must institute a process that will guarantee everybody involved in this process of his fair share of his involvement. And what is the fair share of a farmer? What is the fair share of the millers? What is the fair share of the retailers in the shops? And what is the fair share of the consumer? Okay. So if all those things in line are going to be effected, then they are not an event, they are a process. So it's a high time politicians came out. And even as we campaign, what you didn't mention is I've campaigned severally in this country and unsuccessfully got what I wanted.
You're also a politician.
Yes, so when we come out and tell people in my first 100 days, I will reduce the cost of living, that is a lie. It's a lie.
Because it has many derivatives.
Yes, it's a process that has to go and take some commendable period of time. Like now farmers are preparing to plant. What interventions have we put in place to ensure that the farming, the cultivating, probably the weeding, and then the harvesting will be cheap, so that the flour is going to be cheap ultimately? When we are talking about the cost of fuel, Kenya does not live in isolation. We need to understand that we don't produce our own fuel. So what is the cost of fuel in Kenya compared to other countries around us? Okay. So we need to put interventions that are realistic. Promises must be realistic. When you are making policies, we need to have a way of isolating politics from policy, so that we are able to work for these Kenyans and produce as per their expectations. That will be my comment.
Yes.
Before you give it to engineer, there's a point here which I would like to add. And you know, me, I look things from a different perspective. I look at the politician and I look at the common person, Kenyans. When you look at Raila coming from the airport, there were over 50 gasless vehicles which were driven to Kamukunji. Surely, for heaven's sake, you are walking all the way from your house.
All right. Unfortunately, we've lost some sound in your microphone. Okay. So as we rectify it, let's hear it from engineer. And I'm quite sure you picked a few things from the Kamukunji rally, and we know very well what happens when we decide to have these, let's call them consultative meetings as I like, because we have another one that is coming this weekend. The first one was quite charged, and he has that, I don't know whether it's a talent or what, but he has mastered the art of pulling numbers. And as Dakari has mentioned, over 50 gazelles. Actually, there were over 50, looking at the trail that was there. And then you're telling Kenyans who are grappling with the high cost of living. Before elections, life was hard. Now it's a little bit harder, if you ask me. And a lot of Kenyans want to identify with something they can touch.
Well, I just have a feeling that sometimes as Kenyans, we betray ourselves in terms of, there's a variety of people who present themselves to be elected as leaders. But unfortunately, the appetite for people who show opulence and money to be our leaders misleads us into electing these people, assuming that their richness will also have a trickling effect on our lives, which is very unfortunate, because if you elect somebody who is coming to you with a guzzler, be very sure that you will pay for that fuel yourself. I was on a flight on Monday coming from Dubai, and on the business class section there were 10 legislators from Kenya coming from Dubai. That seat only is $5,000. As on the economy side, we are paying $500, $700. So I asked myself, we are spending over $50,000 to fly these people from Dubai, where they were there for some consultative meeting. To what effect it will have in our lives, we don't know. And these are the very people here we are grappling with. We don't have CDF money to pay, to support kids with bursary. So there is a complete disconnect between what we perceive as good leaders and what we elect as good leaders, on what we expect as leaders ourselves. So Kenyans have a responsibility in terms of, as much as we are going to interrogate the electoral process, and it's good as Chebukati has demonstrated, he can defend it. But even you, what kind of garbage are you putting in there? Or what kind of product are you putting in there so that you get the best results? So it's really upon us as a country that, yes, we are going to continue having elections, yet we are going to be given promises, but can these promises be matched by leaders who can deliver them? Because if you look at this administration right now, they told us that when the Bible comes down, cost of living will come down. Okay? Definitely that was not possible. But many Kenyans could not see that. The cost of fuel is very high, even in Europe.
It's even higher.
It's even higher than even any other, even in Africa. It's cheaper. If you could go to the UK, cost of fuel is very high. So how Kenyans are supposed to get cheap fuel, I don't know. Unless you're producing it yourselves, and we are not doing that. And the cost of energy impacts on everything. In our ability to produce, in our ability to transport, in our ability to live in our homes with light and everything, and cook and all those things. So as a country, we need to be able to interrogate some of these processes, so that, these promises, so that whoever is giving you this promise, you can see if he's somebody who can definitely be able to deliver it or not. This administration has come with a lot of promise. We are going to give them the opportunity to see if they can deliver. But I can tell you that window is shutting down very soon. Come the next budget cycle, Kenyans will demand that these things you told us, they have to be reality. We cannot wait for saying, oh, Uhuru did this, Nani did this. It's time for you to show us you can do.
And as we wrap it up, I'll give you a minute each. What are we looking at, Engineer, when we talk about those consultative meetings, and we know how this goes, and the two leaders have talked about no handshake? In a minute.
It's very clear these are not consultative. They are one-directional meetings where the politicians make a pronouncement. Kenyans are told the direction things will take. But the unfortunate thing is that below these conversations, there are untold stories of things that are power struggle, power at play between the various sides of the political divide, which many of us don't understand. And we're just being played like a chess game where we are pawns moved here and there. What I'll just call on to Kenyans, remain peaceful, listen to whatever these people will say, but it's for you to decide as a country what direction you want to take this country. If you're going to go into war because of taking positions which are extreme because of the position you have with one political divide or another, it's your own decision. But we as a country need to remain peaceful, focus on solving our economic and social problems which are affecting individually and in your own personal way without the politician being there.
All right. Dr. Isaac?
Quite often politicians have their own interest. There is no one time that a politician will go to the street for the interest of either the nation or even the citizen of this nation. Sometimes, by virtue of what they pronounce, Kenyans benefit because we see to benefit from whatever they bring forward, so that if it materializes, one way or another, it might benefit the nation. But 3/4 of their interest is self, and it has nothing to do with a common person. As I mentioned the other time, over 50 Gasalas from the airport to Kamkunji coming to find people who footed from their own houses and never had a single meal for that day. I don't understand how Kenyans sometimes reason. I mean, if they are able to provide you with the basics, let them provide you with the basics so that you are able to do the work they want you to do. If that is not the case, then I think they should not use you as a rubber stamp. Politicians are usually people who are self-centered. Finally, I will have told Kenyans that the pressure that we are currently going through, you know, we have gone through the effect of COVID, we are in the effect of drought, climate change, which is a major cause of mental health now. You hear quite a number of cases these days, people committing suicide, and you hear people are not even getting a meal forget about going to school or buying luxury things or anything that could help them. So mine would have been, let our politicians do whatever they want to do in the boardroom and wait for the season for politics. And if they can't do anything in the boardroom, then they have nothing to do actually for us. So the best thing is, let them sit, logically discuss what they want to discuss, come up with a framework of what they want to tell Kenyans, and we are there to hear, we are there to listen, we are there to action if it makes sense. But if it doesn't make sense and they want to create positions for themselves, I don't think if President Ruto will want to create any position for anyone outside his government. Yes. So if that is the case, then let's not bother Kenyans, because you look for a job, look for it from another place.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Musau?
Yes, thank you very much. I think the very first thing that the president, the government of Kenya should do is to develop rapid strategies and also implement them, so that which will lead to a reduction of the cost of living. Those strategies which will fix or reduce the prices for the essentials, the prices of the basic commodities, which are really causing a big problem. Because I know that there have been food riots in some countries, and with a changed political atmosphere like there is now, it is quite easy to get out people to the streets, and we can get into trouble. So this, I'm advising the president to take this and get the team in place and give clear commands for people to sit down, work overnight, and we are here to help and come up with strategies that are reasonable and that can be implemented within a short period of time to bring down the cost of living and to reduce the prices for essentials. Secondly, I advise that for Kenyans to continue to remain peaceful, because it's one thing to call upon people maintain peace, but it's quite another to ensure that the peace is kept, is to develop deliberate self-help programs by the top leadership, whereby all national appointments reflect the face of Kenya. National outlook. That's very important.
All right. Let's hear it from Mark as we wrap it up.
The absence of anarchy does not always mean there is peace. When people are not fighting, they're not making noise, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that there is peace in a country. Peace can only come when there is justice, and the justice comes from the truth. The Article 1 of the Constitution talks about sovereignty of the people. All the elected persons in this country are representatives of the people, and we want them to continue representing the people who elected them. This country is of time to begin causing solutions to problems of the people who are citizens of this country, not making stories day in, day out.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Engineer Crispus Wadiba. We also had Dr. Isaac Hassan. We also had Dr. Benjamin Musau. And we also had Mark Oseno from the Kenya National Union of Teachers. Are you a lawyer? You've really quoted a lot of sections of the law. Give a lot of challenge to our council here.
No. I'm just a friend of the law.
Yes. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you. It was an interesting conversation. Shukran sana. And thank you so much for indeed your insight and for making time as well.
We thank KBC also for having us here.
Thank you so much. That's where we put a cap on KBC News Check this Wednesday morning. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. We're going to make some time, some other time. My name is Bentro Enjoy. Byron Abuli has been a sign language interpreter for this live program. Thank you so much. I'm now giving the baton to Nancy Okware, who will take you through Tamrini and Kurunzi Mashina.